Hey, how you doing? I'm Professor Jurus, and I wanted to make you a quick video and talk to you about strobe light and incandescent light combined. And we're going to combine them in order to do very creative effects and special effects in the camera. This is what you've all been wanting to do, so this is a very cool assignment. And what you're going to be doing then is you're going to again be using your Vivitar 283 or any type of strobe light that you can take with you wherever you're going to do this. So what you're going to also start to think about when you're starting to dream up and create your photographs in your mind before you go take them is you need a scene where there's like a lot of different little lights. Like it could just be, you could actually even do this in the studio if you got a couple strings of Christmas tree lights and you have somebody moving them behind the subject, or you have them on the subject and have the subject moving for a while. And what you're going to do though is during that time you're going to do a time exposure where the lights are moving, and then you're going to use the strobe light to freeze the subject and also illuminate the subject correctly, so the subject is looks like a correctly made photograph. In other words, it's not too light or not too dark, but you're going to see all the streaking of the colored lights. But doing it in the studio, it's going to take some real effort, I think, to come up with something super creative. But there's so many different situations you could do. Outdoors at night. If you were down in Miami, there was a lady down there that did night photography for a long time, and she said she would go out at like 3 o'clock in the morning and walk around by all the hotels and stuff and photograph the pools with the lights on and stuff. And some of the photographs were just gorgeous. I'll show you a nighttime photo at the end of this too that I took down in the deep south of my dog on a picnic table. I think it was like 4 a.m. in the morning, but it wasn't a strobe light and incandescent light combined, but it certainly could have if I would have got a strobe out and illuminated the dog. The dog is just a silhouette in this picture, but at the time I wasn't even thinking about creating a photograph like that, but I could have illuminated the dog and it would have been even more gorgeous than it is. So again, the strobe light is going to be used to light the subject, and the rest of the light is happening. There's another photograph at the end of this video I'm going to show you that a student took, and they had a person leaning against a pole in the Oregon district, and they had cars driving by, and this was at night. So then they used their flash to illuminate the person that was standing by the pole, but yet we have all the lights moving, with the cars going by. So you're going to want to shoot at maybe 1 second exposures or bulb exposures, and simply set off the flash at some point during the exposure. Now when you start to look at it again with digital, if the subject is blown out, then you need to close down your f-stop on the camera lens or turn the power down on the flash. If the subject is too dark, you need to open up your camera lens. So you should have the perfect exposure on the subject, and then the other little lights are going to be like moving around. Now another technique I want to talk about that you can use for this assignment is called the Jurist Drift. And what the Jurist Drift is, it's something I started doing when I used to do weddings. And what I would do is I would simply use the flash on camera. So I'd put the flash on top of the camera, and then use a slower shutter speed than normal, like 1 second, a half a second, and you could experiment with this. But what I would do when I was photographing people and stuff, I would fire the camera and then move it. When I fired the camera, it froze the subjects, and then the movement of the camera actually adds this like blurriness effect to it. It's kind of, in Photoshop, there's actually a motion blur that's very similar to this. It's probably what it's captured or done after, but you simply, again, you focus on the subject and then move it. So you fire it and then move the camera when the shutter's still open, and you'll get this pulling effect, but the subject will still be there and be a nice sharp focus. So give that a try. I think you'll find it quite interesting. And let's look at some photos now. Hope this helps. Okay, I wanted to start, before we get into incandescent light, just show you can also use, like, for example, the strobe in daylight. This is with the Jurist Drift. This was drifted upwards. So what I did was I was down in the Everglades, and this was in a very dark, like, jungle area, and I had the model standing there. And what I did was I fired the camera at like a slow shutter speed and moved it upward. and then fired the flash off in my hand, and you could see it froze the model, so the model doesn't look like the rest of the photograph, and that's the effect that you're trying to get with the Jurist Drift. You can see the highlights that are light coming through from the back foliage that they did the streaking part, and same with the foliage too. And this is the other photograph that I talked about in the video, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's an incandescent photograph, just a time exposure at night, but this is the one I said would have been a whole lot better if I would have just popped the flash off too, so I could have had my more illuminated than just being a silhouette in the photograph. So always think about all these different techniques that you're learning when it's like your bag of tricks that you take on the road with you. So this is an example of a photograph, the photograph done by Lauren Curtin. She owns a studio out in San Diego now and is one of our alumni. So if you're out in San Diego, stop by and say hi. But this is a beautiful photograph she did of one of our old lab techs named Chip. And this was done, again, late at night. You can tell that, and you can see this light back here behind Chip of a car driving by, and then she had perfect exposure on this, just setting off her strobe and freezing him, and the rest of it's creating motion. Some things that weren't moving, again, like the telephone pole here and stuff, they're going to remain sharp, but if there would have been more cars even in the picture, it would have been kind of cool too. And another cool example of what you're looking for. So this was done right down in the Oregon district in the evening, and this might have been like 1 second, something like that. They held the camera down on bulb, set the flash off, and you could see how nice the exposure was. It's just the perfect amount of light. He's not overexposed. It's actually balanced between what's balanced right here and what's going on there. So it's really a nice photograph. This photograph is actually a little bit bigger than the cropping too. It's being cropped by the video format, but I want to give the photographer credit because there is quite a bit of space below the person's feet right here, so they didn't cut off their feet. Another example of a very cool photograph done with the strobe incandescent light combined. So the incandescent lights being all these lights back here that are happening, and things moving around the cars, and then the photographer just fired off the flash and froze this person in the middle of their frame, the boxer, which is really a nice photograph. I really like it. Another cool example, this was just done right in the photo studio, using I think a pin light or something, and just moving it around quite a bit, and then popping off the flash. See, I'd say moving around quite a bit, moving around like crazy. And here's a very similar one to the last one. I think this one could have used a little bit more power on the flash, so either if the flash was on manual power, I probably would have just opened the lens up another half a stop to try to illuminate this area here. And what actually happens when you turn the flash up a little bit higher, or you open your lens up, is it'll actually, the subject right here, it'll burn this out, so you won't have the red in there and stuff. It would let the person's face just appear better than it's actually showing. But kind of cool photograph. I really like all the different colored lights they had moving around. And here's one that's kind of cool. I want to explain a few things about it, but it was done using sparklers. The first thing I want to say is we don't advocate the use of pyrotechnics and Roman candles and so forth in your photographs, but use those at your own risk if you're going to use them. We take no responsibility for you burning yourself, so I would just use a flashlight. But the interesting thing here is the person in the foreground here was illuminated by the flash, and because this was such a time exposure, they actually probably had an image on the film, just like we see the person with the sparklers back here. So they were probably illuminated like that. But if you look at the difference in exposure here, you can see that this person did receive the extra exposure of the flash, and the flash didn't, travel all the way to the back right there. So to illuminate her, but she has the exposure that's on her is actually just from the sparklers being illuminating it, and a little bit of the flash that reached back there to get her. And another one just using a pin light in the studio and then setting off the flash. What's really nice about this one is the correct exposure. So this is what you're looking for. Again, you want to make sure your subjects are correctly illuminated when you set off the strobe light. If they are too bright, you want to close down the lens on your camera. If they are too dark, you want to open the lens up on the camera. And that should be all you need to know. Hope that helps.